Now, another objection that I don't deal with in here, but I deal with in another little article, is an objection that came up offered by a philosopher named Michael Martin. Now, some of you have heard of Michael Martin. He's written a couple books. One of them is called The Case Against Christianity, and another one is called, I think it's called Atheism, A Philosophical Refutation. Now, Dr. Bahnsen and Dr. Martin were supposed to come into contact, if you know any of the history. They were supposed to debate in Tennessee somewhere. But because of supposedly some disagreement over the tape distribution, Michael Martin backed out of the debate. And so Greg proceeded to show up anyway, lecture on what he was going to do, and then also analyzed Martin's books, and it's a tape seminar you can get from CMF. I think it's called Michael Martin Under the Microscope, so if you're interested in there. But Michael Martin, after Dr. Bahnsen died, I think it was in 1996, wrote an article for some Australian magazine called Tag versus Tang. Clever title. Tag, the transcendental argument for God, versus Tang, T-A-N-G, the transcendental argument for the non-existence of God. And what Michael Martin does there is to try to show that logic, science, and morality presuppose the non-existence of God. Right? Just the opposite of what Tag sets out to do. Now, I won't go into this. It's not very profound philosophical writing, but I'll give you one example of what he does there. And if you're interested, the article's on my website, and you can look at it there. But he argues that in the case of science, science presupposes the uniformity of nature. We talked about this, right? We agree with this. There must be regularities. But then he says that Christianity undermines that because of our teaching, the Christian worldview's teaching of miracles. Miracles are irregularities. We don't have, therefore, a regular nature, because God at any time can come in and violate, to use his language, the laws of nature. And if that's the case, he argues, how can you have science? Because you have no real regularity. If God can intervene at any time, how do you know the sun will indeed come out in the west tomorrow, rise in the east tomorrow? Yeah. It's getting late. So how do you know these things? I'm from California, so we like to think of things revolving around that state. So the objection is supposed to show that without regularity, you can't have science. Christianity doesn't give you regularity, so you have to presuppose the non-existence of God. Now, again, how do we answer this? This is Sunday school stuff, isn't it? How do we answer this? Well, first of all, he doesn't understand the nature of miracles. What is a miracle? Well, here's a bad definition of a miracle. God violating natural laws. Why is that a bad definition? They're his laws, they can do what he wants, right? They're not nature's laws, are they? There is no such thing as nature as a entity, right? It's a reification. You're making a thing. There's nothing wrong talking about nature, just provided we don't think of it as a thing. It's a shorthand way of saying what? The created realm that God providentially regulates, right? Something like that. So there are no natural laws. All laws, in a sense, supernatural. Okay, so God doesn't violate natural laws because there's no natural laws to violate. So he doesn't have an understanding there. Moreover, what is our understanding of, even if we want to use the term natural laws, what is our understanding of them? Well, it's not a deistic understanding where God winds up the clock, right? God winds up the clock, takes his hands back and watch it go around, and maybe every once in a while has to rewind it again. Okay, that is a deistic conception. That's not a Christian conception. God is involved in everything that comes to pass. Everything that happens is directly from his providential hand. Right? God is to use our confessions language, the primary cause. Now, we believe also in secondary causes. In our confession teaches in that section what? That God can work above. There's three ways it says it. God can work above it, against it, and something like in addition to it. What is it? Without it. Without it, above it, and even against it. Okay, his providences. So we make a distinction between providence that is ordinary and providence that is extraordinary. So God's providence that is ordinary is the regular way he causes things to fall out, predictable ways. Not because nature is wound up in a way that he lets go of it, because he covenantally works in certain ways, in an orderly way, predictable way, and therefore we can expect certain things to happen. God is not bound by those, though, his ordinary providence. He can work above, without, and against them. What is his way of working above them, for example? How does God work above ordinary providence? Think of Sarah. Sarah was barren, right? Sarah's an elderly woman, and he works above ordinary providence there, right? It's not extraordinary in one sense that a woman conceives, but that somebody who is barren conceives, he works above ordinary providence. He can work without them. Okay, he can do things that go against providence. He can do what? Stop the sun from moving in the sky, right? Or the earth from rotating on its axis, right? Whatever you want to say it. He can do those types of things. He can go against them, and he can go above them, and he can go without them. He can go against, above, and without these things as extraordinary providences. Now, Michael Martin says, well, God doing that shows that we can't do science. But that's not the case, because primarily God works in an ordinary way. But what about his extraordinary providences? Well, this is a problem only if we have a God who is completely arbitrary, right? I'm just going to perform a miracle. One day I'm going to cause the sun to stand still. Another day I'm going to cause seas to part. Another day I'm going to cause axe heads to float. Another day I'm going to cause donkeys to speak. Okay, some days you're going to fall through water if you walk on it. Some days you can not fall through water if you walk on it. Okay, is that our conception? And more importantly, is that the biblical teaching of miracles? That God just arbitrarily does things differently sometimes. What are miracles? They're extraordinary providence for what purpose? For God to display his power. For what purpose? To validate his word, and typically for redemptive historical reasons. Right? When do most miracles occur? In big redemptive types of periods. What's the most obvious example? Life of Jesus Christ. Right? What does Jesus do? Perform miracles. Why? Because God is demonstrating that this is his only begotten Son. He demonstrates it from his conception all the way to the resurrection and ascension. Not everything about Jesus' life is miraculous. Right? Not everything he does is a miracle, but miracles punctuate his entire ministry. Previous to that, we have the story of the Exodus. Right? Lots of miracles take place there. Other occasions, miracles take place, but they come in a way that God displays his power, typically for a redemptive purpose. It may be exclusively for a redemptive purpose, but I don't want to go beyond what I really know. But it seems like, in most cases, they're for a redemptive purpose, to reveal his redemptive will by means of his power to his people or to those that oppose his people. What other things come with miracles? It comes with a theological explanation, right? It comes with a theological explanation. God explains what he does. Why does he open up the seas for the children of Israel? We don't know. He just did it. No, we don't. We do know why he did it. To save his people. To fulfill his promise. He promised Abraham, didn't he, that he would give his children that land. And here you have a fulfillment of his promise. Why did God do it? There's the answer. Right? There's lots of things that we don't know what God did. But somebody may come to me during the break and point out something that I'm missing here, but I can't think of any miracle that we really have no good idea why God did it. They come with some type of explanation, whether it's a broad theological explanation or even a specific explanation. Jesus explains specifically why he performs miracles sometimes. So miracles aren't something that are willy-nilly events that somehow mess up our ability to predict the future or call into question the regularity of God's ordinary providence. So Michael Martin says, well, you allow for, your worldview allows for miracles to take place. They can happen anytime. How can you get regularity out of that? The answer is what? That's a very poor way, in fact, a false way of characterizing the Christian doctrine of miracles. Okay, first of all, it's not natural law that God violates. Secondly, your conception of miracle is unbiblical. It's pagan. Therefore, you're not offering as a real critique of the Christian position. On the Christian position, God does promise to regulate the world in certain predictable ways. But we also know that God is free to violate those, as our confession says, but he does it for a purpose that is almost always, if not always, explained. And therefore, if that occurs, if when a miracle occurs and God explains it, then how is it that we can't, that somehow affects our understanding of the uniformity of nature? It doesn't, does it? There's no problem there. We don't take those into consideration when we perform our inductions. We always will say that, yes, the sun will rise in the east tomorrow, provided God doesn't perform a miracle. There's no reason to expect it now, but God could do that. But that's not going to affect our normal science, because we know that would be an extraordinary providence. And we have accounts for these miracles. So does this undermine our ability to do science? Of course not. Based upon very bad theological mistakes. One of the things that you're going to realize, if you don't realize it already as an apologist, is that most of the attacks on Christianity are based upon not really understanding the Christian worldview. Right? This answer to Michael Martin isn't something that I had to go into modal logic over and show him where his modal modus ponens went bad. I just had to explain to him what Christianity really teaches. And just by explaining it, the objection falls by the board.